Welcome back to Pivot Points. I'm your host, Dave Allen, founder of Brand Pie, the brand consultancy working with businesses to deliver impact at pivotal moments in their journey. The concept of a sofa in a box is so simple, it's genius. But the real genius lies in how you grow such a business from the ground up. Keiran Hewkin is the CEO and co-founder of Swyft, a leader whose success is built upon the ability to embrace failure, break things, and bring a laser-focused vision to life. Join us to explore how Keiran built a brand through bootstrapping, boldness, and brutal simplicity. Well, delighted to have you here today, Keiran. Could you just give us a little sense of your background and how you ended up in the sofa business?
Yeah, sure. I would guess I'd first say I haven't really met many people in this industry that aim to get there. Most people fall into it. I don't know any kids that grow up thinking, I want to make or sell sofas when I'm older. So it was a bit of a serendipitous journey. I come from what I call like grown-up industries where things are pretty serious. I worked in, my first job was in plastics and fiberglass sheeting manufacturing for truck bodies and automotive sector. And then I went into some kind of oil and gas adjacent industries and manufacturing of chemicals and, really kind of heavier industries and automotive and truck mounted road sweepers. And it was all very serious and very proper and very engineering heavy. And we were working to millimeters or 0.1 of a millimeter. And when you got stuff wrong, people got hurt, which is obviously very serious. And in my mid-20s, I wanted to move to London and drink beer with my friends, like every young man in his mid-20s. And I started looking for manufacturing jobs, and it was either sofas or food. And I had enough of smelling of chemicals every day. So I thought, I don't really want to go home smelling of food every day. So I got into furniture, into a bespoke furniture role as a production planner. And I just thought, yeah, I'll take that job, move to London, figure it out, see if I like it. And that was, over 10 years ago now. And I got there and I started talking to people on the floor, and it was very artisanal and it was very creative. And I said, what tolerances do you work to? And they were like, what do you mean by tolerances? Like, we just make it look pretty. And, I said, but you got a drawing, like how plus or minus 5. I was like, well, millimeters, no, centimeters. And I thought, yeah, this is the place for me. This is what I want. This is what I've come looking for, a little bit more art, a little bit more craft, a little bit more kind of scope for some imagination. And that's really how I got into it. It was purely by chance, driven by a need that wasn't a career choice, but a lifestyle choice. And I guess I fell in love with it.
Yeah. And when you came to set up Swyft, I mean, that's a big pivotal moment in anybody's life.
Yeah.
I mean, what got you to the point where you thought, I'm going to start my own business? And
I'd always had my own businesses or tried. I'd like to kind of laugh and say that Swyft's the only business I've had that hasn't failed yet. It's been a bumpy road, but even in school, I would sell chocolate bars and things like that, mainly by kind of buying all of the ones from the canteen, so there weren't any for anyone to buy, and then selling them at a markup. But with Swyft, it was really that I'd been at this company that I was working at for a couple of years, and I'd worked my way up, and there was this big mismatch between the value add time in the process. It takes about 8 hours to make a sofa start to finish, but the lead times are 3 months or 8 weeks, 6 weeks. And I just really couldn't, my kind of core manufacturing and lean manufacturing background, it really unsettled me that there was an industry where you had such a low amount of value add time versus the wait time for the customer. And that arbitrage must be worth something. And it's just one of those niggling thoughts. I just couldn't get it out of my head. And I thought, you can go and buy a brand new Range Rover today and drive it off the lot. And that's £100,000 vehicle. So the fact you can't do that with a sofa is just bonkers. I remember asking, a few people about it, and I got a mixed set of results. A lot of answers were, I said, do you think anyone would want something next day? Do you think someone would want something like this quickly? most people said, no, I think you're happy to wait. No one's in a rush for these things. And I thought it really sounded to me like what everyone said about books and Amazon or anything that was online. Yeah, of course, people will wait. But if there's an option between two of the same thing and one is immediate gratification and the other is 6 weeks, one's going to win and it's not going to be the 6 weeks. So I talked about it for a long time and I'd asked a lot of people, and eventually I kind of I took the presentation to the board. I was the COO by this point, and I sat down in front of everyone. I said, this is what I think we should do. I think there's a market. We can create a market here, not just compete in a market. We can be a leader. We've got manufacturing in London. We could do it on an inventory light model, all the right things to say. And the founder of the business I was at said, no, I don't want to do it, which, as is his right. It was his company.
Mm-hmm.
He decided he didn't want to do it. And I knew in that instant, I was like, well, this is it then. I'm going to go. I'm going to have to do it myself. I can't not do this. And I remember just thinking, if I don't give this a go now, it's really going to wind me up forever. I'm always going to be thinking, what if? And then I quit the next day and left to do it myself.
And so you've quit your job. You've got a great idea. Had you got finance in place? Had you got friends and family in place? Had you got a manufacturer?
No, nothing sensible.
That's a fairly radical move.
Yeah, nothing sensible. Look, I'm a big believer in the kind of philosophy of like burn the boats and the rest will come. So yeah. I honestly thought like I'm never going to be less ready, but the time's never going to be any better. So might as well go for it. I was young, didn't have any family commitments. I was renting. That quickly came to an end. I wasn't renting after that. I was, doing a bit of couch surfing with a few friends. And I had no funding, no manufacturing. So we started, my business partner at the time and we started a bespoke business to make kind of custom furniture to build a bit of working capital. Because, you take deposits for that. You take a 50% deposit. Basically going around and telling people I can get anything you want, anything you can imagine made, take a deposit, then figure out how to get it made with third-party factories, project manage it, deliver it, get the balance payment and build the business that way. So we built the business like that over a number of years, kind of bootstrapped, doing something completely adjacent to Swyft, but always with that mindset of we have to build enough critical capacity in a factory and enough cash and enough operational know-how to be able to launch a consumer-facing brand. And that was the kind of back solve to how do you launch a consumer brand with no money, no factory, no customers, was to do it that way around. So it was a bit of and that took about 3 years actually to build enough momentum and capabilities within our organization to be able to give Swyft a go.
And have you brought in sort of financial backers? But by that time, was the idea well formed enough to actually make sense to somebody to invest in the business, or were you still funding it yourselves at that stage?
Yeah, by the time we came to get it to launch, we'd had enough kind of proof points and enough traction to get external investment, which we got, which really helped. As you'll know probably better than anyone, consumer brands are extremely expensive in the most part to build, especially inventory-based ones. Is probably one of the biggest barriers to entry, and why brand is so important. But yeah, we got some institutional backing, which we had for a number of years. They've moved on from the business now and made their returns, and we're privately owned again now. But yes, we brought in some institutional money. That had its own pressures as well. It was really challenging. The expectations are very, there's a very high bar for that. And you become, from being the most important company in your ecosystem to yourself as a founder, you're then measured against every other kind of company that's in that fund. And they're across a variety of industries and return on capital and things. So it was great. We'd definitely not be where we are without it. But it brought its own kind of pressures and issues and challenges. But yeah, we invested a fair bit in the first few years of Swyft. We were loss-making for quite a long time.
And another pivotal moment must have been the launch of Swyft and the business model and sofa in a box. And,
Yeah.
it's so beautifully simple. I always admire businesses that get their name right, get their idea right. The simplest ones are always the ones that win. How did you get to that level of simplicity? Did it just come in the shower, or like months and months of talking?
Yeah, I would say it was a little bit of a combination of both. It was months and years even of talking around the idea. My original premise for what became Swyft was a B2B just-in-time manufactured sofa within London. That was what I pitched originally in the business I was in before. And to do that very quickly, you'd need to manufacture it in whole component parts of a sofa. And those component parts, like arms, would mean that it needs to ultimately be separated out into its component parts, finished in individual cells in manufacturing, and then out the door and assembled at the last point so that you can manufacture faster. Because we thought, actually, we'll do a made-to-order model and then deliver very fast, basically take an order in the afternoon, make it that night and deliver it in the morning kind of thing. When I left and started talking about Swyft, I didn't know I was going to build a consumer brand. I just knew that the manufacturing process could open up some arbitrage and some leverage and defensibility. In the process of scoping out Swyft over those next few years and talking to other retailers and talking to wholesalers and talking to the likes of Amazon and DFS and Furniture Village and all of these big names, almost everyone turned me down. And I wanted it to be a B2B business initially because I was restricted on capital, and everyone was turning us down. And it kind of dawned on me eventually that it was because it would undercut their own business model. How do you have a range of sofas that you're delivering next day that are great, and then also justify why people have to wait for all the other ones that you sell currently? And these companies are all running on customer order book money. Like, they're all, negative working capital models, which is great, but it basically means that you're just borrowing from your customers to pay for your operation. And no one at one of these big companies is ever going to take that punt. Like, why would they do it? There's no career benefit to them to being the one that risks the farm. When, as you say, people will wait if they have to. So that's a long way of saying, like, getting told no 1,000 times made me think, well, it's not a bad idea. People are saying no. I'm going to have to do this myself as a brand. Obviously, there's no incentive for other companies to sell this solution that I think I have. And then it came down to, okay, well, if we're going to have a brand, we have to cut through and educate a customer at the same time as sell them a product. And that's going to be really, really hard because most people are trained to wait for this item. They're trained to go to a big box store and sit on 50 and pick one and get upsold some care package that you didn't even know existed, that you probably will never find the paperwork for. Like, we've been conditioned into that. And especially in the UK, because there's some really dominant players that own a huge amount of the market. And that drove the simplicity, or the need for simplicity. So it's like, okay, well, we're going to have to cut through. We're going to have to communicate very clearly and very simply what we do, because we're going to have to educate a consumer at the same time as sell to them. And most of the time, when you try and do that, like, it will fail. And it's very hard to do. And if you're trying to do more than one thing at once, you, as a business, it's extremely challenging. So we just boiled it down to the simplest possible thing we could do. And then the name came in a brainstorm. We'd had loads of names back from an agency. We didn't like any of them. None of them worked for us. And we just sat down in the space of about 5 minutes and came up with Swyft. And when we knew, we're like, yeah, that's it. Don't touch it. Don't play with it. Don't try and change it. We've got it. We've struck gold. No one touch it again. We're done. And we all walked out.
Yeah. No, I know. I mean, it's a magical feeling when that happens. And you
the
just
temptation
know
is always to tweak, right? And then you're like, no, you can stop.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you probably have to reject about 500 before you know it's right.
Exactly that.
And the process by which your brain goes deeper and deeper and harder, and then suddenly this mallet hits you in the forehead, and there's a really simple word.
I know,
and you go like,
it's exactly that.
That's a great great story. And so did you just start with sofas and sofa
We
in a
started with
box?
one sofa.
Yeah,
One
brilliant.
sofa in 4 colors. One sofa in 7 colors, 2 fabrics. And we kept it very simple. We didn't want to cloud any of the messaging. So we sat down and we talked about names, and everyone's got all these fancy names for sofas, like the Cuddle Muffin or the Cambridge or the Dular, and we just called it a Model 01 and said, okay, well, there we go, it's our first model, and that'll be what it's called.
And what happened when you went public and launched it?
Well, we had to turn the website on. This is where I thought maybe I'm onto something. We had to turn the website on to link up all the payment gateways before we started advertising. We got everything ready. And in the process of turning it on and getting the payment gateway set up, but about a week before we launched, someone found us somehow and bought a sofa. And we thought it was a test order. And we were like, okay, who's done this? Turns out it was a genuine, real customer. We didn't have that sofa because we hadn't launched. We were just trying to set the website up, and they'd bought it. So we flew the sofa from our factory in Portugal into Heathrow to deliver to him, and then drove it from Heathrow directly to his flat in Camden and delivered it because we were so excited. We were like, I probably lost about five times the cost of the product on that order. But there was no way we were letting that go. No way. So that's what happened, and then we then had our launch party and kind of sat down and waited for the orders to come in, and for the first time in my kind of business experience, it just worked, and people got it, and the orders were coming in, and we were fulfilling them, and people liked it, and we had loads of issues, and we still have loads of issues, and it's still really hard. But right from day one, it just resonated with a certain consumer, and we could see that, and it was a magical feeling. I'll never forget. I'll never forget it. I was in a board meeting, and my team ran into the board meeting. Like, didn't care. We had investors there and chairman and everything. They're like, someone's bought one, and it's a real person, and they bought a Swyft. And I was like, this is nuts. And I ran out. And I can't remember, but I don't think I actually went back to that board meeting. So
yeah, that's fantastic. And I mean, in the years running up to sort of finding something that was successful, how important do you think the learnings of failure were in getting you to that point where you knew it had to be simple, you knew it had to work, you knew you couldn't let somebody down? All of those qualities that you've been talking about are really rare qualities in a human being, to get them all together. And they usually come through adversity that you've just got to do it. And that flying the sofa from Portugal and drive, that's the sort of thing that makes a business in my mind.
Yeah, I think it sets a tone as well, right? It sets a bar. Like, you're like, no, this is it. We will not fail, and it's really important. Like, if you can't learn from your failures, then it's going to take you a very long time to be successful, because you will have far more of them than you do successes. Right now, I may have arguably one successful. I joked with you that Swift's the only business I've had that hasn't failed yet, but that's really serious. Like, it's a serious point. Capitalism's creative destruction, and every business will end at some point. And I've had other businesses that weren't successful, or I've been involved in businesses that weren't. And there are themes to how furniture companies go bust, and it's either over committing on inventory, or it's over trading and reducing margin and not being able to, and that negative working capital cycle goes against you, and you can't pay for the things you've already sold, and you spiral downwards. So I'd seen those, and I'd been involved in it. I've seen how hard it is to get out of it, and I've seen the damage it does to brands and businesses and customers. So right from day one, I said, we will never sell an item unless it exists and is on our shelf. So we know we can't let a customer down. We can't oversell. We can't overcommit. And then the pressure's on us to get that inventory creation right, and to build the right amount of product in the right colors, and have that available at the right time and in the right place for our customers, rather than just casting a huge wide net and saying you can have any color, any shape, any day, whatever. And we built that philosophy into the business, and we sat down very early and wrote a list of sacred cows and red lines that we were never going to cross. And in all honesty, we've reversed some of them as we've grown and matured. But the idea with them was that we didn't know which ones of them were going to be the most important to us and our success and our customers. So we said, well, we're going to do all of them, and then we're going to slowly unpick the ones that aren't really important, and we're going to commit to it. And we built it in right from the start of the business. And that was all based off the hundreds of ways that I'd failed in the past, or people in the team had seen things fail, and as I said, there are a lot more examples of failure to learn from than success. And failure seems as well, for me, I feel that it's more of the ways to fail are a bit more timeless than the ways to succeed. Some companies can succeed by just being in the right place at the right time and having their moment. And you could have recreated the same work with the same people at a different moment in time, and it wouldn't have worked. But most failures are failures because of things that are pretty timeless, human mistakes, overconfidence, under commitment, lack of quality. Those things are fairly consistent. So you can get a bit more from failure than success in that sense.
And when you've failed, what do you do mentally to compartmentalize that and put that behind you and go, okay, well, that's a fail, that's a tick, move on? Do you find that tough, or is that something that you just put down to business and have a pint of beer with yourself?
Yeah, well, interestingly, I quit drinking just after we started Swyft, so
that's probably wise. 24/7.
There's some correlation between my successful businesses and my sobriety, but that's probably for another topic. That was a pivotal moment. Stopping drinking, we recommend it. But I think that failure is so constant that you just have to embrace it and accept that it's just a part of the creative process. And as long as the really big failure is when you double down on it, or you refuse to accept it, or you let your ego get in the way. And those ones can be really destructive. You very rarely make full-on bet the farm decisions in business. But most things that end up being a real problem are ones where you take a small risk, it doesn't work, you double down, it doesn't work even more, and then you double down again. And before you know it, your small test that really, at the time, you probably didn't care whether it succeeded or failed too much. You've become so invested in it emotionally as a leader and wanting it to work that you end up creating a massive problem out of something that you could have taken or leaved it a month ago. And so that's really important. And then it's also just having a great culture about it. I try and tell my team all the time, if you're not failing, you aren't pushing hard. And there's nothing that I say to them, there's nothing that they can break that I can't fix as long as they tell me. So I will never be upset about failure or something going wrong, because it's an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to improve something. We were pushing the boundaries of our competence as a business and professionals. And that's fine. That's exactly where I want us to be a lot of the time. But you can't hide it. Sunlight's the best disinfectant. We make it ugly, call it out. Someone in an adjacent operation might benefit from hearing about your failure. So, share it, wear it as a badge of honor as well. And if you can do that and build a culture that embraces that failure in a way that isn't critical, then over time you just compound into much better professionals. And that's really important.
No, I don't know whether it's sort of right or wrong, but it feels to me that you need to have like 10 failures to get one success.
Oh, at least.
Yeah. And therefore trying to build a culture that, people who are working for you and, they want to keep their jobs and they want to be a success, but having a culture that enables people to believe that if they fail, they're actually contributing to the betterment of the business longer term. because you're learning, and you're learning what doesn't work in order to refine what does work and focus in on what does work and build a better business. I found that incredibly hard in my business to get people comfortable. And I almost say the same line you just said. Look, I have no problem with you failing as long as you tell me.
Yeah.
If I know, I can fix it. If I don't know, I can't fix it. And if you try and sweep it under the carpet, I really will get quite cross. And if you try and hide it. But getting people comfortable, it's a really fine balance, that, in a business. I don't know if you find that.
I definitely do. I find something that's helped me in the past as well is the other part of that sentence I use, that, you've got the first bit, which is there's nothing you can break that I can't fix. And the second part is, but when I break something as a CEO, it's going to take everyone to fix it, because my mistakes are normally the biggest, they're normally the most costly, and they're the ones that are at most risk of groupthink and the lemmings off the cliff scenario, because everyone's like, well, the boss says it. And I'm like, well, guess what? The boss is an idiot sometimes. And, and those are the ones that can be really difficult. So I think it's about, when I get stuff wrong, which happens all the time, I try my best to be conscious of sharing that as widely as possible and say, I wanted to try this. We tried it. The execution was good. The outcome was poor. This is the learning. I've not done well here. And it's taken a huge amount of effort to fix because of the nature of the decisions that I tend to make. And that seems to help set a good culture.
And have you managed to, or do you have an infrastructure of people around you that you talk your ideas through that don't actually work for you, that they will just give you it straight and go, that sounds like bonkers to me, Keiran. What the heck are you doing? Because what type of people do you use as guides and mentors?
Well, internally within the business, I've got some great people on my senior leadership team, and even more junior managers that are very comfortable with telling me that it's a ridiculous idea.
That's brilliant. That's hard. That's really hard to do. Yeah, younger ones usually tell you you're mad rather than the older ones.
Yeah, relatively young team, and I think that in the most part, it might take them. They might come back with another person as a bit of backup and say, I think you're nuts, or this is a bad idea. But in terms of the rest of the team, I'm very fortunate to have two really strong business partners that bought into the company a year ago. They've got a good balance of commercial and operational and legal kind of sense. They also know the industry, so it's very hard for me to kind of cloud it in jargon or with pretty photos, which is everyone can do, right? When you're operating in this space, you can make a bad idea look good by chucking in some industry jargon and some concepts that no one external really understands. So that's really helpful. And then I've got some other founders and CEOs that I've known over the years that do really hard stuff in really difficult businesses. And when I talk them through ideas, and they've known me long enough where they can just tell really by the way I'm talking about it. They're like, you're not really sure about this one, are you, mate? And I'm like, well, no. And I'll kind of end up with that. As I articulate it, I realize that, they're right. I'm not that sold on it. I'm trying to sell it to myself rather than, the really exciting ones. I tend to find you don't even stop to talk about with people. You're like, just like we said earlier, when you know.
Yeah.
And if you're seeking lots of different opinions and trying to sell it to yourself, then that's probably a sign.
And when you sort of launched it, what year did you launch the sofa in a box?
December 2019.
2019. So that's quite good timing with COVID and things like that. So how did that affect? Was that a positive for you or a negative?
It was a positive for us. I won't deny that. It was a different kind of positive for us than perhaps the rest of the industry. It pushed a lot of people online, which really helped us. But because we were manufacturing ourselves and we were only selling from an inventory basis, we probably left a huge amount of orders out there where, as I said before, if we didn't have it made and manufactured on a shelf, we wouldn't sell it. Everyone else was taking huge order books and raking in a lot of cash and sat on 12, 15, 20 weeks lead times, and then eventually fulfilled those orders, whereas we did it the other way around. And because we're running our own manufacturing as well, keeping those people safe and navigating all of the laws around kind of social contact was really challenging. But yeah, look, I would say by and large, COVID was a positive for us. And again, like I said about basing your learnings off success or failure, people from the outside could look at Swyft and say, brilliant, that's a great idea. It's done well. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to execute the same way. But we had our moment in time that was unique to us. And I don't know whether we would have made it. Of course, I like to think I would have made it no matter what. I'm an entrepreneur, create my own destiny. But in reality, it might not have happened. So yeah, it definitely helped. I don't know how much. We had our own issues with it too. The 2 years after COVID, like I say, categorically were hell. The inflation, interest rates, house moves being down, that kills furniture. So the kind of coming back to earth after COVID was a real painful experience.
Now, how did you get through that? Because that's obviously a pick yourself up moment and deal with it.
It went from feeling like everything we touched turned to gold to feeling like everything we touched broke very, very quickly. I was fortunate enough to have a friend whose background was M&A, and he's a Goldman Sachs guy, and he was advising us at the time. And he was seeing some data quite early on about inflation and input prices, and kind of laid out some concerns to me, and very early in the process said, look, my advice to you is survive, then thrive. The next 2 years are about just not getting wiped out. Everyone's overextended from COVID. The supply chains are a mess. Trim your position now. And we made some really hard choices on staffing. We made some really hard business choices. And even then, we acted early, we acted fast. Made.com was still in the market at this point. They had great people. They tried to do the same things and didn't make it. Had a great brand, great product. And even then we only just did. So that really was a pivotal moment, because the market was still quite strong, but people I really respected that were in other spaces were telling me that things were going to get really bad. So I phoned some kind of people that I knew within the industry who were working in kind of 2008, 9, and asked them what that was like and what they did. And if they were back there, what would they do again? And now it turns out the inflation wave wasn't as severe as that, but high interest rates kill furniture sales, because when people don't move, they don't buy sofas. And we've very quickly dried up our market. So yeah, we cut hard, we cut deep. I wanted to do it once, so we tried to go further than we thought we needed to. We just about got away with doing it once, but even then it was only just enough. Yeah, so my advice with that was if I can give any, is that you probably need to be taking out double the cost you think, because half of it's not going to come off.
Yeah.
And by the time you start thinking about doing anything like that, you're probably already too late. So act with some real urgency.
And it's really tough when you've put your heart and soul into creating a business to suddenly find you're in an economic situation pretty much totally out of your control, and you have to adjust. And the emotional stresses and strains of that moment, few people really understand, because you love your employees, you love your company, but the numbers tell you what you've got to do. Did you struggle with that sort of rational, emotional side, or were you just totally rational? We've got to do this to survive, and it was very quick and decisive?
No, look, I made the decision quickly.
Yeah.
In the matter of probably 2 weeks. We'd kind of very quickly got together as a leadership team in January 22, and we'd made all of the changes that we needed to make by the middle of February 22. So it was about a 4-week process from me thinking this isn't going to be good. My friends are right. What they're telling me is right. And even if they're wrong, there's no, the downside risk of overreacting now is not a problem. but it was awful. Like, yes, I made a very quick decision. Yes, we acted quickly and decisively, but yes, it was still awful and emotional. And, I made sure to do have as many of the conversations as I could myself personally. There were some really hard conversations. There were some really hard choices. Yeah. And it really, really sucks. And the only thing I can do at that point in time is think that you do that hard thing for everyone who's staying and who is still in the business today and who has had years of a successful career after that point as a result of that decision. Because, you can hold on to everything for a few more months and then everyone loses everything, or you can make that decision. And, it's a thankless task, but it's the job, isn't it? And as you well know.
Yeah, and if you don't do it, then the alternative is total failure and everybody loses. So
Yeah,
you
exactly.
you've got to do it. It's just and you've got to be fast, and you've got to be first, and you can't put it off. But it's very easy. I find it very easy to talk myself into, well, just give it another 2 weeks and let's see where we are. And that's out of, niceness, not weakness. It's just, you want to be kind to people, but it's never a good thing to do.
No, and it's the same as hiring, right? When you hire someone, like, if they're great very quickly.
Yeah.
And then, if they're not, and it's not working for whatever reason, they could be great, but in the wrong business, right? And that can become evident. And, I've almost always ended up being after it thinking, geez, I left that too late. I should have done that sooner.
Yeah.
And for the individual, because, everyone wants to be doing a great job in a company where they work well and it works for them. And if it's not good for them either.
Yeah. And some of them may not see it, but you're absolutely right. If you hire somebody, within 2 weeks, and they may have bullshitted you at the interview. They may not be quite as competent as you thought they were from your judgment. But whatever you do, you've got to be kind to them, because they could waste 2 years of their life doing a job that they're not ever going to succeed in. And
exactly.
totally,
or you may have missold the role to them, or they've misunderstood it, or they just actually think this culture's not for me. And you're right. Like, absolutely. And it's the same as those it's the reverse side of the good ideas. When you have a good idea and and like, also when something's wrong, and our first chairman at Swyft always used to say to me, Keiran, if you think you have a problem, you have a problem. And I've got it written on a post-it note on my desk.
Yeah, it's a great quote. That's a great quote. And so, fast forward to today. Where is Swyft today?
Yeah, so Swyft's a very exciting point today. So I always wanted Swyft to be Swyft Home rather than the sofa in a box company. We were very narrow at the start with just having a sofa. We now have, from a business metrics point of view, last year we did 24 million. I think this year we're going to be over 30.
Wow.
We've launched in Germany and the Republic of Ireland in the last 3 months. The German market's going really well. Ireland's only been 2 weeks, so we'll see, but the initial signs look good. We have launched outside of furniture, outside of upholstery into furniture. So we have dining tables, chairs, sideboards, TV units, the whole home offerings coming into play. We want to focus on products that matter. So, we don't want to sell trinkets and, cushions with live, love, laugh written on them in 1,000 different fonts. We want to be exercising our design nous and really making those pieces that come into people's lives at really important times for them and be a little part of that. You refurbish your house, or you buy a sofa or a dining table and chair set, when you move in with your partner, or there's a baby on the way, or you've got married. And we think there's space in the market for pieces that are really nice, high quality, and that matter to you. So that's good. The furniture's, going to be close to 20% of revenue by the end of the year. So that's a big tick for me. You'll know better than most how hard it is for a brand that's synonymous with a particular product to get the brand permission from their customers to venture outside their vertical, and to have that well received is really, really important. So I'm delighted that our customers love that. I've always said I want the Swyft experience and the experience of buying from Swyft to be so good that if we were to bring out a toaster, people would buy it. And I'd never bring out a toaster, but
Oh, please do, because my God, nobody's invented a toaster that can toast bread.
yeah, that's true. Actually, maybe that is solving humanity's greatest problem. Like how we
Yeah.
haven't fixed toasters and how we haven't got Bluetooth to work properly is an
Yeah, yeah.
absolute
My
mystery
wife
to
would
me.
be your first customer. The toaster drives her absolutely bonkers.
There we go then. Maybe we should do it. But
Cooked on one side, raw on the other.
raw on the other, and then
Now
just
you've got me thinking.
shreds. There we go. Let's do it. Let's do
Yeah,
it. Let's get a toaster startup going. Remember, call it pop or beding.
yeah. That's a good one.
So yeah, that's where we are at the moment. We've got a huge amount of new product coming. We brought a buying and merchandising team in. We're using third-party factories this year for the first time as we venture into these different categories. So a huge amount of new product coming in. The same ethos, next day, fast, no quibbles, 100-day returns policy on everything. And we're really starting to stretch our legs and just venture into extending ourselves. Now we've got the basic operation nailed. After 5 years of graft, we're suddenly an overnight success.
That's fantastic. I mean, huge congratulations. I mean,
Thank you.
I'm sure everybody listening to this who listens to this will have learnt an awful lot about the ups and downs and the reality of really running and starting a business. And if you were to sum up in a sentence or a few words, the characteristics that you think you need to get to where you've got to, how would you sort of summarize?
You need an almost unlimited curiosity, I would say. The ability to look into every detail of your business and your customer and think that's interesting. Why is that like that? And to do that every day for 1,000 days. And that leads to insights that compound on each other over time. And I've not seen anyone in any line of business that isn't just really innately curious about why things are how they are and why things are working like they are or not working. And my very best people within my business and people that I've met have that level of curiosity. That'd be number one. Number two would be grit, because it's going to be really hard all the time. Like almost all the time, it's going to be really, really difficult. And you need a level of resilience and grit to get through it. Those two things.
That's absolutely fantastic. Curiosity and grit. What a great way to end the conversation. Now, we always finish these podcasts with a little fun fact. Now, when I was at Kodak in my early career, there was a legendary story that Xerox, a little company called Xerox, approached Kodak in Rochester with this idea of photocopying bits of paper. And Kodak said, that's never going to catch on. Nobody's going to want to copy bits of paper. Why would they ever want to copy bits of paper? And from that, Xerox became one of the and eventually overtook Kodak in size. Now, I know when you were a youngster, you had your own little version of that story. And it'd be great to just finish on that and share that with the folks listening.
I did. My dad had a whole computer system set up in the house. We're one of the very early families to have computers in the house. They're all LAN connected. And I turned around to my dad and my mum at the time and said to them, this was probably 1997 or 8. I was 7 years old. And I said that I think it would be a really good idea if they could connect the internet to the television so that you could browse the internet and watch things and play things through your television screen. And they both turned around to me and said, well, that's crazy. Why would anyone want internet through their television? That's what a computer's for. And I obviously lacked the grit or the curiosity to follow that up at the time. And maybe it'd be a different conversation today if I'd done it. But that one got away.
Yeah. Well, there's always one that gets away, but that enable people at Netflix and Disney Plus and all of those to
they've
to
done
take
all right.
the market. You've got to leave a bit of space for some others.
Exactly. I like to think that, I just got out their way. It wouldn't be fair otherwise.
Yeah. No. Well, thank you, Keiran. I mean, it's been absolutely fabulous talking to you, and thank you for being so open, transparent, and honest. I think people will really appreciate that, and wish you huge success with Swyft. I'm sure we're going to be. My marketing manager, Amadeus, wanted me to finish by saying he's a huge fan. He promotes it everywhere. He tells everybody about Swyft.
Brilliant.
I think half his home is filled with Swyft products, from what he was telling me.
Sounds like we've got the other half to do.
Yeah, I've definitely got one of your advocates if you ever need an advocate for the website. But fantastic, awesome talking to you, and
thank you very much.
All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Pivot Points. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more fascinating conversations with industry leaders in our previous episodes. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to know more about Brand Pi and how we deliver impact in the pivotal moments that matter to you, head over to brandpi.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.